Friends, we are very happy to inform you that e-modules are prepared for B.Ed program at Telangana by the School of Education, Osmania University under Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching Scheme MHRD New Delhi. It's indeed our pleasure to share with the teacher educators and the prospective teachers and get maximum benefit out of it. It's a first of its attempt by us. We continue to add many more such lessons to share with you all.
So the story of light, a spectacle, is an installation that is also an informal learning exhibit and has been put together to showcase especially interdisciplinary as well as transdisciplinary learning. This installation is at the crosstalk between art, science, history, anthropology, design, mathematics, and also the overwhelming human anthropological story. So why is it that such installations are required? Such installations, they connect several disciplines together without dividing them into separate subjects. And when we are able to connect several subjects together, we kind of disallow the breakages, the fragmentation that appear in knowledge construction. The interweaving of subjects, concepts, and themes is required in creating a multifaceted learning environment, and installations such as this provide an out-of-the-world sensory experience, and this kind of sublime experience dissolves the line between art and life. Now, this spectacle, it is a learning experience beyond any particular age, and it questions several aspects of science. It questions our understanding of human civilization. It questions the connection between light and the development of human civilization. It questions our own consciousness. It questions our ideas about who we are and why we are here, and our internal consciousness. And this particular festival, this particular installation has been showcased at several festivals, including the Story of Light Festival in Goa in January 2015, and then private screening was done in Hyderabad in Jubilee Hills, and then the Hyderabad Literary Festival had it over in January 2016, and quite recently, this year in 2019, we put it up at Jawahar Bal Bhavan for about 10,000 school children to come and experience it. So now we have it here for you, for all the teachers to understand what this particular installation means. So the story of light begins with light and life. So if light were not there, life would not be possible. So essentially, the story of life is the story of light, and the story of light is the story of life. Light enabled life on planet Earth. Light enabled the development of civilization on Earth. And looking at the environment, looking at the sublime learning environment that the story of light is, story of light employs, as you can see here in the visual, ultraviolet lights, and ultraviolet lights are a part of the light spectrum. As we all know, it's common knowledge that there are radio waves, then there are microwaves, there are infrared waves, visible light, UV light, X-rays, and gamma rays. And radio waves have the longest wavelength, and the gamma rays have the shortest wavelength. So essentially, gamma rays have most energy, and in that order, ultraviolet light is also short wavelength as compared to visible light. Visible light are 7 colors. They have longer wavelengths as compared to ultraviolet light. So as ultraviolet light's wavelength is more, sensory perception is relaxed, because when wavelength is more, energy is lesser. So then our sensory perceptors, whether our eyes or whatever senses, they're not doing as much work. So there is not as much distraction involved, and therefore there is more clarity in these environments. So the ultraviolet environment essentially is a perfect mimic for a meditative environment. There is less sensory stimulation, and this translates into less emotion and less thought. So to begin the story of light, we've got to begin with the story of the Earth. Earth was formed 4.54 billion years ago by separation from what is known as the solar nebula, or a fragment of the sun's dust. And later on, volcanoes possibly created the first atmosphere without oxygen. And then later, the cooling possibly formed oceans and several water bodies on the Earth. And in contemporary times, now we do know that we have 5 oceans on the Earth and 7 continents, but there was a time when all the continents of the Earth were joined together into a large landmass called as the Pangaea. And Pangaea drifted along the faults on it and slowly separated into the continents as we know of them today. I hope all of you teachers can name the continents and oceans on the Earth. This particular visual here is to remind us that as evolution began and fish turned into reptiles and reptile turned into mammals, and then humans evolved out of these evolutionary changes, as of today we are staring at a mass extinction event. Scientists now share that half of all species will vanish by 2050. Food chains and food webs will collapse, ultimately threatening our own extinction. We are at the top of the food chain and the food web, and imagine if everything below us collapses. Everything is going to collapse. And this is an important application of food chains and food webs that we are not teaching in our classrooms. We are just providing content to children as syllabus, and that is not going to help anywhere, because unless we get children involved to start thinking about what human action is doing to life on planet, none of the science we teach in primary years and middle school years has any meaning. So now the question we've got to ask is, how can each one of us stop this destruction? We're all contributors to this catastrophic outcome. And what is it that we can do now? This is just one terrible consequence of separating the sciences and social sciences. It's extremely important that there is always crosstalk between the disciplines of science and various disciplines of social sciences. An integration or interdisciplinary approach will bring a better perspective. So I urge all teachers to look at these possibilities when you teach whichever subject you're teaching, whether science, social science, mathematics, language, whatever it is that you teach. I'd like to ask you to assess yourself as to what is it that you can infer about the process of formation of life on Earth. How do you think the Earth was formed? How do you think the life on Earth was formed? And what is it that you could do as an individual to help and save and support animal species thrive on the Earth? And how could you engage your own students in meaningful understanding of their place in the cycle of life on Earth? The next segment, the next theme in the Story of Light installation is light and civilization. Essentially, human civilization progressed due to light, particularly sunlight. And this particular segment looks at the various facets of natural light that humans came to understand and appreciate. To start with, we've got to look at what we learned as students. We often came across in our textbooks a term called Old Stone Age, and early man was what we studied about. when Old Stone Age came in the picture. And we were taught that early man was associated with the discovery of the fire, the discovery of the wheel, and the discovery of fire ultimately led to the emergence of cooked food, and humans started cooking their food. Humans went from hunter-gatherers to populations that started cooking food and also growing agriculture. But there is yet another phenomena that the early humans must have engaged in and with and then been in awe due to its brilliance. And this could have been possibly when the earth was still Pangea, when all the continents were together and perhaps had not drifted apart yet, or even if they were in the process of drifting. Early humans must have seen these phenomenal movements of light in the sky called dancing lights or auroras and been blown away by them. Now, just to understand what auroras are, when these dancing lights, they occur in the northern hemisphere, they're called Aurora Borealis, and when these lights appear in the southern hemisphere, they're called Aurora Australis. So essentially, when charged particles from the sun's surface, they come and strike the Earth's atmosphere, they come and bombard with atomic particles. They cause electrons in the atoms to move to a higher energy state. We know that, correct? So when a charged particle comes and attacks an atom, the electron gets excited. So when these electrons drop back to a lower energy state from the excitation, they release a photon of light, a packet of light. And this process creates a dancing light phenomenon in the sky called the aurora. So typically, when the charged particles from the sun's atmosphere strike atoms in the Earth's atmosphere, and if they're striking oxygen within the first 60 miles, you can see a yellow-green color like shown in the visual. If these charged particles are hitting oxygen at about distance of up to 200 miles from the 60 miles, then it appears red. If they hit ionic nitrogen up to 60 miles, it appears blue. Neutral nitrogen appears red, purple with rippled edges, and nitrogen below 100 kilometers appears crimson in color. So these dancing lights typically can be seen from Norway, Iceland, Finland, or the US too, especially the northern states like Maine, New York. Alaska is one more place that is known to give a phenomenal view of these northern lights. Russia and now United Kingdom also has special flights that people could buy a ticket in and go and observe these dancing lights in the sky, and we can be really sure that our ancestors were very much enamored by these. Now, since we were talking about early Stone Age, from early Stone Age we make a movement towards later parts of the Stone Age where humans started constructing stone monuments, and a very popular stone monument, a prehistoric stone monument in Wiltshire, England, is called Stonehenge. So essentially it's a ring of standing stones. Each is about 13 feet high and 7 feet wide. So it's a large stone complex. It's from the Neolithic or Bronze Age era. This is about 3000 BC to 2000 BC. And the phenomenal aspect of the Stonehenge is that the sun passes through one of the stones called the sunstone, and it is believed that this was possibly a burial ground for the ancestors of the Neolithic people, and ancient cultures revered the sun as the source of ancestors, and this practice still goes on even in our own culture. When we offer yearly oblations to our ancestors, we offer them water, we offer them food, and we kind of think of our ancestors during a particular time when the sun is in the south direction. We call it Dakshinayana in our Indian culture. So in Dakshinayana comes the Pitru Paksha, when we kind of offer food and water to our ancestors, believing that in that, when the sun is in that aspect, when it is moving towards the south, is how we can reach our ancestors. So this ancient belief has come down for thousands of years. And even in our culture, sun is considered the representation of ancestors. So it's really remarkable that in England we can still go and see how the ancient people worshipped their ancestors. For the assessment, I'd like for all of you to look for information about Stonehenge online, as well as in books and other sources of media, and compare and contrast the belief system of ancient systems with respect to death as well as the sun. Are there any similarities in the belief systems between ancient people in Stone Ages and our current contemporary systems? Have our systems remained the same or shifted? And also look up a little more about the Aurora Borealis. There's a lot of information that you can gather through other sources. Now we're going to look at the sun as a god or goddess or divinity in various cultures. And as you can see, sun has been considered god across various cultures. The earliest ones that we can think of are Ra, the Egyptian sun god, then Surya, our own Indian sun god. Then comes Helios, the Greek god, Apollo, the Celtic Roman god, Sol, the Roman god. Possibly in the same lines, we have Shamash in Mesopotamia. Then comes on the right side Inti, who is an Inca god of, light and the sun. Nanahutsu, who is an Aztec god, and Kinshutsu, who is a Mayan god. There is, however, one anomaly here, one different visual here. The Chinese thought that the sun was a goddess, and she's called Jihi. Now, in this visual, you can see a goddess coming out of a cave. And this goddess is known as Amaritesu. She is the Japanese sun goddess. And if some of you have been following the news recently, the new king of Japan, he had to invoke her blessings and have a meal with her and spend the night in solace to seek her blessing before he could become the king. That was a rite he had to complete. So Amaritesu still, even today, holds a phenomenal position in the Japanese culture. To the right, you see the dragon deity of sunlight, and across cultures, dragon deities have been, they've always been revered. Now, for assessment, I'd like for you to pause and ponder on what is it that you can infer about the process of formation of life on Earth. What is it that you could do as an individual to help save and support animal species to thrive on the earth? And how can you engage students in meaningful understanding of their place in the cycle of life on earth? So basically, I'm asking you to tie in all the different aspects that you have learned in this particular theme. Now we move on into light and culture. This segment will help you understand how culture developed in relation to rituals, traditions, and all of it was driven by how people understood sources of light. Now, the Chinese have phenomenal fireworks, and these fireworks were invented in China, a celebration, and all ancient cultures, whether the Chinese or the Indian or the Mesopotamian or the Egyptian, all the ancient cultures used noise, used loud sounds to quell away or to send away evil spirits whenever they were having celebrations. So this is how the Chinese originally used to use bamboos. They would put bamboos into fire and the bamboo would split open, creating a loud noise. Then slowly, the Chinese alchemists, they wondered if they could develop newer materials that could produce sound and light. And this came from the idea because these alchemists always looked at the sun and how the sun would come up every single day, and they thought, the king was the representative of the sun. So they thought perhaps they could make the king also immortal. So they started doing a lot of alchemy. They started working with a lot of chemistry and experimented. In the process, by fluke, they created gunpowder. And this use of gunpowder later on in fireworks helped them create phenomenal colors. So essentially, they ended up using arsenic sulfate to produce yellow color, copper acetate to make green color, lead carbonate to make lilac color, and mercurous chloride to make white color. And this is how the fireworks went from China to the rest of the world. And till today, the Chinese, have a lot of fireworks for their New Year and so on and so forth. And even in our culture, if you look at how we celebrate Diwali, we associate light with that festival, and then we have a lot of sound so we can drive away evil spirits. This visual here shows you the pyramids of the world, and the pyramids are not just limited to Egypt. There are several pyramids across the world which revere the sun god. And the first pyramid that was actually built is the really large one to the left side, called the Ziggurat of Ur, and it is in Iran. The next set of pyramids that were possibly built are the H-shaped Nubian pyramids, the H-shaped red color Nubian pyramids that you see in the visual. Those were in Sudan. And then possibly came a lot of the other Egyptian pyramids that you see in the backdrop in various shades of purple. There is also a pyramid for sun that the Mayans built in South America. There is a pyramid that the Mexicans built in Mexico. There is a pyramid of Cestius which was built in Italy. There's several other sets of pyramids, one built in Cambodia, and now we know that pyramids were not just limited to one place, but where sun was revered across several civilizations across the world. In our own civilization, Surya or Savitra has been a deity that we have always revered, who is extremely important in Rig Veda, who's extremely important. He is known as the source of life in most of our scriptures. And here the important thing is, you can see, is that we've used detergent to make this particular painting of Surya. So the reason why we've used detergent is detergent contains phosphorus, and phosphorus glows in ultraviolet light. So we kind of use that property of phosphorus for it to glow in ultraviolet light. This is one example of how you can be creative if you integrate science with other disciplines. To the right side is something to ponder about again. Even though we are a culture that came up with the whole science of yoga and Surya Namaskar and maintaining optimum health, we now see doctors now are saying, scientists now are saying that close to 90 to 100% of all of us are suffering from vitamin D deficiencies. And why is this so? A culture that reveres the sun, a culture that considers the sun the most important. How have we come to become a bunch of people that cannot wake up early in the morning, that have a very sedentary lifestyle, that are not aligning with the rhythms of nature. And I want all of you to ponder on this, on how you can get yourself and your students to think about how you can change the statistics associated with this epidemic. Think about it. Once again, you have the Surya Namaskar on the left side, and I cannot stress to you the importance of this particular practice. It's a very ancient practice in our culture, and I think all of us should engage with it irrespective of our cultural and regional backgrounds, because it is very good for health. On the right side is the Konark Temple. This temple is also known as the Black Pagoda because it's made with black stone, and it's a World Heritage Site. If you go to Odisha and you visit the Konark Temple, what you currently see today is not the actual temple but the entry to the temple, and the entry itself is phenomenally beautiful. So one can imagine how the original temple was. There's many myths associated with this temple, but we do know that it was built by King Narsimhadeva, and when Konark Temple was built, it was built on the beach, so the waves of the sea would come and hit the Konark Temple. It's characterized by this, that the temple looks like a chariot with several wheels, and the wheels that are present on the structure that exists right now are exceptionally beautiful. The name Konark comes from two words, Kona, angle, and Arka, sun. So this was a phenomenal sun temple. And if you get a chance, this is something that everybody should go and see in India. It is a phenomenal testament of the evolution of our civilization. So for your assessment, I want you to ponder on what is it that you infer about the pyramids of the world and the reverence for sun across world cultures. This is a thread that connects all of us, all humans together, irrespective of our cultural backgrounds. Find out more about the benefits of Surya Namaskar and the looming crisis of vitamin D deficiency in Indian society. And how can we, all of us, how could we fix this issue? And what are the cultural similarities in the belief systems around sound and light in Asian cultures? This is a very important perspective we can bring to our youth and children. The final theme that we're going to work on is light and time. And as we've walked through light and civilization, light and life to begin with, light and civilization and light and culture, light and time are also related, because time is a human construct. Time doesn't exist by itself. We humans, because of our sensory perceptions, we create time. And the visual here shows you that the sun is considered the primary source of light, but likewise we have the moon, which is a secondary source of light. The moon is able to reflect the sun's light and provide us very calming light. And time that humans perceived it as calendars over the years, and there are lunar calendars as well as solar calendars. And in India, the Tamil calendar and the Malayalam calendar are solar calendars, whereas the Telugu calendar, Kannada calendar, and the calendars followed in the north of India are all lunar calendars. Now, just like the southern part of India, the southernmost part of India has solar calendars, Southern American cultures, native cultures, also have a solar calendar, and the Mayans especially have built beautiful sun temples and calendars revering the sun. And our Gregorian calendar that we typically use, the English calendar that we popularly call, is also a solar calendar. Now, sun has been a source of development and stability, and moon has been a source of fluctuation. Why do we say that? Even in our historical literature, our kings, they either belong to Suryavanshi clans or Chandravanshi clans, and Chandravanshis were considered to be very fickle. They were considered to be people that would change their mind often. Why is this? This is possibly coming from the fact that the moon impacts tides. If you go to the ocean, the moon causes high tides and low tides in the ocean. And as the tides wane and wax, it also impacts our emotional self. Our emotions shift with the moon's waxing and waning. So I think we are related to the moon in ways that we do not acknowledge in the modern life, and it's about time we went back and understood and appreciated and revered nature more than anything else. The Jantar Mantar is an astrological artifact. It's a phenomenal construction in several parts of India, in Delhi, in Rajasthan, and if you can go and see it, the ancients used a structure like this to tell time, to find out the position of stars. The Jantar Mantar is also a huge sundial. So I urge all of you to teachers to read more about this, to find out more about this. So in summary, as you could see, as we were talking about various aspects of story of light and moving through, we connected various aspects of contemporary culture with science. We connected several aspects of history with mathematics. And if you can remember the slide of the pyramids across the world, that was created by hand by a set of 9th grade children in the year 2014, and they calculated a formula required to find out the number of folds, and built all that by hand. So we connected mathematics to history, we connected anthropology, the study of human civilization, to history, we connected anthropology to science. Because look at the wide variety of materials we've used. We've used common materials like detergent powder instead of paints. We've used a lot of fluorescent markers. We've used ultraviolet paints. We've used most of the materials that we have built Story of Light with have been made using just cardboard, tissue paper, and white glue. So we just took all the scrap we had and built a phenomenal exhibit out of it. So not only is this installation an interdisciplinary learning sample, but it is also transdisciplinary learning exhibit. The difference between interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary is that this knowledge construction happens across subjects, then it is called transdisciplinary. When the knowledge construction happens integrating 2 or 3 subjects, it's called interdisciplinary. So this installation is both transdisciplinary as well as interdisciplinary. So for the final assessment, I'd like you to look more into what kind of shifts are caused by the moon with respect to water, kind of do a little more research in it, and what can you understand about time by comparing solar and lunar calendars, and how can you engage children in understanding the solar and lunar calendars, and how are they different from each other, and study a little more about Jantar Mantar and the science that possibly helped in development of understanding the cosmos. Story of Light is a phenomenal engagement for children. Now this is something we came up with to engage the curiosity of children, to help them look at themselves, their understanding of various subjects and how various subjects are connected with each other. So I would urge you, I want to challenge all of you to kind of start thinking, but what is it that you could do to reduce the gaps between different subjects and bring all of learning together, bring all of knowledge construction together. How is it that you can facilitate multiple perspectives? How is it that you could bring thinking, feeling, reflection, and learning together? Because the many disciplines of learning, many dimensions of learning and disciplines are enriched with the involvement of arts. If you can bring the arts, the sciences, the social sciences, and mathematics as a process together, you can do phenomenal things. And this is what we've got to share about the story of light. We wish you a very happy learning, and between the extremes of thinking and learning involving various disciplines, for sure there is an array of learning states that can be facilitated and constructed by the arts. I'd want all of you teachers to start thinking on these lines and provide phenomenal sublime learning environments for children.